Members present, council members Porterfield, Allen, Cortez, Evan Siegel, Gamble, Huffman, Johnston, and Webb. Thank you all so much. Committee members, if you could, please put your committee member card up. And we have one person here for our public comment. Pursuant to Council Rule 28, the public comment period at committee meetings is limited to items that appear on the committee agenda. All public comment speakers must present proof of Tennessee residency. First, we have Mr. Steve Wrighton, who is speaking on RS 2025-1110 and 770. In opposition, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am a big supporter of Nashville General Hospital. I think it's important to have a safety net hospital in this city. But I do have a little problem with the severance agreement and release that's on your agenda tonight. I just don't think this is in the best interest of the taxpayers of the city. The second whereas in the legislation says Joseph Webb has asserted a claim for compensation and benefits arising from the contract and/or his employment with the hospital authority. I think it should specify that we're talking about the employment contract here. If there's a side contract or whatever else, I don't know the facts and circumstances of that. But to me, the contract rules. I saw it on YouTube video of the meeting last week, and Wally Dietz, your Metro Legal Director, was there, and he said he reviewed the minutes and he reviewed the relevant documents, and it was unclear to him whether this person was entitled to this amount of money. To me, that's how come we have Metro Legal here. We have almost 40 attorneys there. And it's up to the court to really interpret that. We just don't go out and give $890,000 away just like that. And we're looking at potentially a double-digit property tax increase coming up in the budget. So I have a problem with that. If Dr. Webb wants to sue and he wants to sue the hospital authority board and directors, I think they have officers and directors insurance, so they should be covered. I don't know who the insurance carrier is, but that should not be a concern of theirs. Let's see. I think I've basically covered that. The other thing is on Metro Legal wants to go out there and say they want to increase the threshold for council confirmations or settlements. And I'm not really comfortable with that. I think $15,000 is good. I don't see really a justification for that. I'm a big supporter of transparency in government. And if somebody wants to settle with Metro, then a threshold of $15,000 sounds reasonable to me. The pending legislation is for $35,000. I think there's an amendment for $25,000. But I'd like to hear the discussion why that's necessary. So thank you very much. I look forward to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much for that. And committee, I'm going to take a little liberty as chair. We're going to do the first item on the agenda, and then we'll go into the consent agenda because we do have our property assessor here who needs to leave and go to another meeting. So we're just going to go ahead and do that first. So the first item that we're looking at is RS 2025-1106, a resolution approving the plan for the reappraisal and equalization of assessments in Davidson County as submitted by the Metropolitan Assessor of Property, approving a memorandum of understanding between the Metropolitan Assessor of Property and the Tennessee Division of Property Assessments for the responsibilities of parties involved in the 2028 year reappraisal program for Davidson County and approving receipt of state funds, if provided, to assist in the cost of reappraisal. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It has been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 8 in favor, 0 against, and 0 not voting. Now we will go ahead and go on to the consent agenda. The items that we have for recommendation on the consent agenda are RS 2025-1107, RS 2025-1108, RS 2025-1111, 1112, 1113, 1114, 1115, 1116, 1119, 1120, 1121, 1122, 1123, 1125, 1126, 1128, and BL 2025-772, BL 2025-773. Is there anything that anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we take RS 2025-1125 off, please?
1125 has been bumped from the agenda. Councilmember Cortez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Could we bump 1115? It's number 10 on the agenda.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else that anyone would like bumped from the agenda? Seeing none, we will go ahead and read the items on the consent agenda. RS 2025-1107, a resolution approving a contract between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Nashville Public Defender and Middle Tennessee State University on behalf of its Department of Social Work to provide field work experience for students enrolled in certain Middle Tennessee State University undergraduate and graduate social work programs. RS 2025-1108, a resolution approving an application for a market building grant from ICLEI-Local Governments for Sustainability USA Incorporated to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Nashville Mayor's Office to convene local, regional, and national stakeholders to identify ways to build local capacity for public-private investments in sustainable, resilient, and affordable housing, lower energy costs, increase affordable housing options, and improve the quality of life for Nashvillians. RS 2025-1111, a resolution appropriating a total of $355,000 from a certain account of the Community Safety Fund for grants to various nonprofit organizations for South Nashville community safety programs. RS 2025-1112, a resolution approving amendment number 1 to a sole source contract between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County and the Village at Glencliff to increase the value and extend the term of the contract. RS 2025-1113, a resolution approving the terms of a cooperative purchasing master agreement for online government surplus auction services for the Department of General Services. RS 2025-1114, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle the property damage claim of Progressive Insurance as subrogate of Jace Badex against the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County in the amount of $19,536.38, and that said amount to be paid out of the Self-Insured Liability Fund. RS 2025-1116, a resolution approving Amendment 2 to a grant from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Office of Emergency Management to provide resources for hazardous materials or hazmat preparedness. RS 2025-1119, a resolution accepting a donation of life-saving medication from Hikma Pharmaceuticals USA Incorporated to the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department. RS 2025-1120, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle the personal injury claim of Timothy Saunders against the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County in the amount of $14,000, with the said amount to be paid out of the Self-Insured Liability Fund. RS 2025-1121, a resolution accepting a special collections grant from the Nashville Public Library Foundation to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Nashville Public Library to provide services for processing, arranging, and describing archival materials in all formats for digitizing materials in the Special Collections Division. RS 2025-1122, a resolution approving an application for a flagship AARP Community Challenge Grant from AARP to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreation to provide funding to renovate and revitalize the kitchen in the Elizabeth Senior Center, which prepares meals for older adults in the area. RS 2025-1126, a resolution authorizing the Director of Public Property or his designee to exercise an option agreement for the purchase of flood-prone property located at 3050 Boulder Park Drive for Metro Water Services. RS 2025-1128, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle the property damage claim of Murphy Road Hotel Partners, LLC, against the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County in the amount of $16,340.77, with said amounts to be paid out of the Self-Insured Liability Fund. BL 2025-772. These are bills on second reading. An ordinance approving a lease agreement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by and through the Auditorium Commission and the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum, a Tennessee nonprofit corporation. And BL 2025-773, an ordinance approving an agreement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Department of Parks and Recreation and Belmont University to allow occupational therapy students the opportunity to participate in experiential learning. And just so everyone knows, RS 2025-1123 was pulled off of consent. Can I get a motion for the consent agenda? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there anything else that anyone needs to get pull off consent? Seeing none, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Consent agenda passes 8 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The first item not on the consent agenda is RS 2025-11. The second item not on the consent agenda is agenda item number 4, RS 2025-1109, a resolution appropriating to a certain account for the benefit of the hospital authority in the amount of $10 million. Can I get a motion? It has been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All right, motion carries 9 in favor, 1 against, 0 not voting. We do have 10 people here now, with Councilmember Toombs being present. The next item that is not on the consent agenda is RS 2025-1110, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle the claims of Joseph Webb, DSC, FACHE, against the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County and the Metropolitan Hospital Authority of Nashville and Davidson County in the amount of $890,813.26, with said amounts to be paid from the Judgment and Losses Fund, sponsor Porterfield. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? I see Councilmember Johnston, Allen, Evans, Siegel, and Cortez will go in that order. Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
Thank you. I want to shift it over to Director Dietz to give an explanation of what he thinks our exposure is here. The last time we voted against a settlement didn't quite go our way with the firefighter. I'm not going to bring that up, but I do want to make sure that we're taking good legal advice, but I also have a really hard time swallowing this amount of money for someone with the egregious nature of what's been going on and why he is no longer with us. So can you explain, Director Dietz? Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnston. I did want to make one quick correction. My apologies, everyone. We have 9 people here in committee right now. So the last vote for 1109 was 8 in favor, 1 against, and 0 not voting. So I did want to publicly correct that record. And Director Dietz, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate this question and this opportunity to address the settlement. I fully understand 2 things. One is this is a lot of money in anybody's standard. This is a lot of money we're talking about. Number 2, I understand, especially with the events of 2 weeks ago, there are some people curious why we would enter into a settlement at all. If I may take just a minute to explain the history of the negotiation, because I think that's important context for what you are considering tonight, and then the rationale why I believe and strongly believe this is in Metro's best interest. So Dr. Webb's lawyer contacted me last fall. It was October or so. And wanted to discuss a severance agreement, or wanted to discuss a settlement of his claim, rather, for a retirement benefit that he believed he was owed going back to the early years of his contract. And his claim was essentially that the board had approved paying him retroactively, in addition to his compensation and health and general retirement fund, a supplemental retirement package. His claim was that the board approval was retroactive. And in the later years of his contract, he did have, Dr. Webb does have still a very generous supplemental retirement package. He claimed he was owed that going back. We were not able to resolve the claim at that time. We went back and forth for a few weeks. We did not reach a settlement. So fast forward to February 25th, which was the day the CEO Evaluation Committee at the Hospital Authority voted not to extend Dr. Webb's contract. I saw an opportunity to get some benefits in addition to just a release on this claim for this amount of money. And so I started negotiations with Jason Holloman, once again, Dr. Webb's attorney. In the midst of those negotiations, we reached a deal, and that was Wednesday evening. And we reached a deal in principle, subject to a settlement agreement, severance agreement being written, and subject to the approval of the hospital authority and this body. So soon after we struck the deal in principle, Dr. Webb issued his letter saying that March 14th would be his last day. So let's talk about three things of value that I see in the settlement agreement. One is the $890,000 claim for a retirement package. There are board minutes in the hospital authority records from 2020 that indicate the board did agree to approve a generous retirement package retroactive. And that passed the board unanimously. And that was in 2020, which pulls it forward to well within the statute of limitations on a contract claim. So the hospital authority did not have the money to pay it, so it never got paid. It did get added to his employment package that was in place, and for the last 3 years, he's been getting a very generous retirement package. But the board minutes indicate it was approved retroactively. The question is, retroactive to what? 2018, the beginning of that contract term, which was a 3-year term from 2018 to 21, or was it retroactive, to 2015, or was it retroactive all the way back to 2015, actually, which was his original employment date? The recommendation of the outside expert retained by the board said, we suggest you approve making it retroactive to 2015. So that pulls in the entirety of his claim, which was in principal amount well over $300,000. Dr. Webb's attorney had an accountant who I respect and had verified, who ran compounded interest from the beginning of the contract going forward. If Dr. Webb had gotten the claim, that compound interest was at 5%, which was a very conservative number. Over the same period of time, annuities averaged 5.5%. Markets averaged 13% annual gain. So it was a conservative number used to compound the original number. So I believed we had significant risk, and I'm sorry if I said otherwise last Thursday. I didn't mean to imply at the hospital authority. The gentleman spoke against this settlement, said that I said it was not clear. What I was intending to convey was that there were a couple of technical defenses. There were some defenses to this claim, but that I believed we faced significant exposure in litigation based on the board minutes and the fact that there were, to our understanding, at least 3 board members on the board at that time who would testify in favor of Dr. Webb's position. So this was far from a frivolous claim. It was a very serious claim. It would have been very difficult to defeat on a motion to dismiss or a motion for summary judgment. It would have gone to trial. So settling that claim in and of itself was worth something. But to me, it wasn't worth $890,000 unless we got some additional value. The additional value that I negotiated for Metro was that Dr. Webb would agree to leave quickly and that we would not have a 4-month lame duck period with acrimony and frankly, self-destruction all around the relationship through June 30. So he agreed to leave on March 14th. That was a negotiated point in the severance agreement. The other thing is, in the severance agreement, he gives Metro a complete release of all claims. So I believe that is a third bucket of value for Metro. And for those reasons, I strongly believe this is in Metro's best interest.
Thank you so much, Director Deets, and also welcome back. Good to see you. Glad that you're here. Councilmember Johnston, did you want to continue to speak?
If you don't mind. So if it was to go to trial, and I agree with you that it probably would go to trial, what did he give any indication on how much he would be suing for? Like, what is our exposure there? What's the worst case scenario?
The worst case scenario is the amount we're paying plus future interest compounded over the next few years. So the claim would continue to generate compounded interest, and he would be entitled to that as a matter of the claim. But there were other claims that Dr. Webb was discussing bringing against Metro that were unrelated to the retirement benefit. There were other claims in litigation that he was considering. He was very reluctant to give us a full and complete release, but I insisted on it if we were going to pay that amount of money. So I'd rather not go into those other claims because they were discussions between counsel and in the context of a settlement, but he had additional litigation claims over and above the retirement.
I just find it interesting, I guess, that the hospital authority would, without having the money, because you did say that they agreed to pay whatever retroactively, but didn't have the money to do it, that they can be making those decisions. And now here we are as the taxpayer, because the hospital authority is not the one that's writing the check. Metro General is not the one that's writing the check. The taxpayers are writing the check. And so it's really a bad feeling to be on the hook for this amount of money to someone based off of a board's decision that was broke, basically. That is incredibly irresponsible of the board. When we subsidize them incredibly every single year, and it seems to grow, and this committee just voted to give them another $10 million because they lose millions every month, it sounds like. I mean, is there anything that can be done? I mean, I guess there's nothing to be done, but it's just incredibly frustrating, and it's leaving a really bad taste in my mouth.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnston. We have Councilmember Allen, Councilmember Evans Siegel, Councilmember Cortez, and then we have Vice Chair Toombs and Councilmember Gamble. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My main question has been answered. I guess a question that would follow up on one of the comments that was made is, are there any of those previous board members still on the current board today?
Director Deets? No. Okay. Thank you so much, Councilmember Evans Siegel.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of this has been answered, but I want to be really clear because I think a lot of people, to echo what my colleague has said, they read a news story and they say, oh, well, the contract wasn't renewed and there are financial irregularities and he's about to get $1 million payout, as you round in your head and you think, how is this possible? But I want to be really clear for the record here and make sure everybody understands that this is, there's nothing, we are not admitting that he in any way did a good job, are we? No. And we are not in any way admitting that this is related to his performance.
Director Deets?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, this is totally unrelated to his performance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cortez, you're recognized.
All my questions were answered in the previous, so thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Vice Chair Toombs, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of things. One, and I say this as chair of the Minority Caucus, there's a long history of acrimony between Nashville General Hospital and Metro, and that transcends going back to previous administrations. There are a lot of employees and community members who are not only supportive of the hospital, but are very supportive of Dr. Webb. So I would caution colleagues not to add to the acrimony and disparage Dr. Webb, because there are many in the community that feel like he did an excellent job at Nashville General, from the food pharmacy to increasing the number of insured patients who use Nashville General, increasing Nashville General's revenue over the course of his term there. I understand that we all know that there's some bad blood between multiple parties, and so it's not a good move forward to continue with his leadership. But let's not disparage and add to the acrimony. Second thing, Chair, speaking of Nashville General's revenues, I did have the council office to send out a spreadsheet. Finance was very kind and pulled the last 10 years of audited financial statements and put together a nice spreadsheet that shows all of Nashville General's revenue over the past 10 years, all the sources of that revenue, and then what their net position is for the for those 10 years. Yes, we do pay a large subsidy to help Nashville General Hospital, but Nashville General also generates a significant amount of revenue on its own. And I think that the body needs to be aware of that, so that moving forward, when we're talking about how to improve Nashville General, we actually have accurate information. And a third thing that my mind is starting to slip, and I'm forgetting my, oh, yes, I remember it. And I know there wasn't any discussion on that previous, the $10 million supplemental, but I did want finance to talk about why, if it's appropriate, Chair, that we're having that $10 million supplemental. It's not that that money is currently needed. That is based off a projection. There are some revenue from the state that Nashville General has been getting for the past several years, and it's looking like they're not going to get it this year, which may be the cause of them having to be in the red this year. So I just wanted, if it's appropriate for finance to talk about that, why that $10 million supplemental is necessary. And I also had a question about the summary that was sent to me, because the net position for fiscal year 24 says $29 million, and that sounds a little high. And so maybe I'm reading that number incorrectly. So someone could explain that as well.
Thank you, Vice Chair Toombs. I will allow it based on, since the $10 million settlement did come up in previous, and a council member did mention that settlement in response to this piece of legislation. So I will give some leniency and allow finance to speak on that. So either administration or finance, if you could speak on it, please.
Hey there, Amanda Deaton-Moyer, Department of Finance. So the funding for the supplemental is necessary to continue the operations at their current level through June 30th, 2025. That does include an agreed upon financial forecast that we've been working with the hospital on. And it also includes dollars to procure a financial consulting firm to help the hospital address material findings from the annual independent audit, as well as some of the recent internal affairs investigation. One thing you mentioned was dollars from the state. I can't confirm that it's not coming, but it has been delayed. And what I can say is I don't have the net position in front of me, but I can get that back to you and we can have that discussion.
Thank you. Councilmember Toombs, did you have anything else?
So the 10 million supplemental is based off what you project they will need. It's not an actual need. Well, it's not actual numbers right now, but it's your forecast of what they may need through the end of the fiscal year.
It's what they'll need to maintain operations as they are today.
Okay. And if that money from the state actually comes in, would it reduce that $10 million need?
We're not thinking so.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Toombs. Councilmember Gamble, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess this would be for Mr. Dietz, I'm not sure, but the comment was made that the Hospital Authority Board was irresponsible in making, I guess, that type of retirement severance offer to Mr. Webb or Dr. Webb. I just wondered if you have any comparable, if you all in your consideration in your negotiation looked at what other cities with the hospital budget like Metro budget offer their hospital directors for severance and retirement in the amount that you all came up with.
Director Deeks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Council Member. The 2020 board discussion was based off of expert report that surveyed CEO salaries of other hospital systems in Nashville and around Tennessee. And the conclusion drawn from that expert was that a generous retirement package similar to the one that the board made retroactive for Dr. Webb, that was similar to what other CEOs of other hospital systems were getting. So there was some data to support some comparables, yes.
Councilmember Campbell.
Thank you.
Next, we have Councilmember Johnston and then Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. Two questions. So the 2020 board conversation and where it went retroactive, I mean, I'm assuming the answer is yes, but does the hospital authority have the authority to commit retroactively a retirement package? I mean, I don't know. I'm not talking about a retirement package in my life, so I don't have a whole lot of experience there quite yet. But I've never heard of a retroactive application to a retirement package. Is that it just seems odd.
Director Deets.
Madam Chair, thank you, Council Member. The short answer is the board did have the authority to do that. And there was an allegation or a claim made by Dr. Webb that he was promised that at the beginning of his contract in 2015, that the prior CEO had it, had a generous retirement package on top of the other components of the employment agreement compensation package. And the board, there was not a lot of discussion, but the board determined that they should make it retroactive to 2015, and they had the authority to do so.
Okay, thank you. And my other one is just a really quick question for finance, because I'm looking at this spreadsheet of the last 10 years, and I could be wrong. But when we were looking at this in the audit committee, when this came out, the number, it says for 2024 revenue from the government is 58 million and some change. I thought that that the substitute budget amended that, and it was closer to 62 million that we sent to Nashville General. Did I just make that up?
You're recognized.
Thanks. I'll look it up for you and get it right back to you. I just didn't have that right in front of me.
Okay, that'd be great. Because I just feel like I want to make sure that we're putting out accurate information. So it probably needs to be double checked throughout the spreadsheet.
Absolutely. I can do that pretty quickly.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Evans, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me, even though I'm not on the committee. I guess going back to kind of the discussion points around the authority of the authority, like because whomever made the decision to start recording all the meetings, it was very good. I've watched every single meeting. And so one of the, I guess, concerns that I had in listening to the authority deliberate is really around like the CEO performance piece. And that there were at least one evaluation, maybe more, I'm not totally sure, that may have been missed over time. And so I guess I'm wondering, kind of related to like the checks and balances of our authorities when they're making decisions, whether it's about money or performance, which I could see would be if I was at that level and didn't get a performance review, that would be a huge negative that I could use in a claim, against my employer. And so is there any kind of connectivity between the authorities and like big HR or any kind of, relationship where they should be sharing, like I, conducted a review and it has to go and be, in that person's file? Or is it truly just sitting within the authority only and we don't have that bigger picture visibility?
Director Dietz.
Thank you again. So in this instance, it depends on the board or commission, but in this instance, the hospital authority is the appointing authority. And they have the authority to select the CEO, not to renew the contract, to terminate for cause, and the whole gamut in between. So much of this contract happened before I started here 4 years ago now. And I think during COVID, of course, some of the oversight fell by the wayside. It's my understanding that the board previously, prior to this year, did not engage in very active evaluation processes and procedures. I can't explain why. It's something that I think going forward, it would be something that the law department would suggest to the mayor to recommend to the boards and commissions that they do that. It's a policy issue. It's not a legal issue per se, but I think it could help avoid legal issues down the road. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It basically just indicates, it sounds like there's not really the strongest of connections. And I agree with your perspective that there should be, and that recommendation I hope would be received favorably, because it kind of goes back to like the financial question in the end, because we have the power of voting related to all these financial elements, but then we also, are not necessarily making the full connection to like, what did we learn from this experience? And like, one of the things I learned is, every board and commission should be recorded and it should be on YouTube for everything. And I don't know if that's going to be a priority in the next budget, but it should be. We need that kind of visibility. But yeah, you answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Councilmember Webb, you're recognized.
I'm not sure if my question is for Mr. Dietz, and I'm glad you're back, or the finance. Okay, so at the last hospital meeting, it was stated that there was $8 million still usable for the hospital to draw off what we offered them for the budget. That's what was stated. But we're asking, they've been losing between $2 and $3 million a year. So if they got $8 million to continue drawing off of, and they're losing 2 or 3, the budget goes through May, we should be good. Are you using that $10 million, evidently not for operating expenses? Are you using that for cash flow? Is that why we're asking for additional $10 million?
You're recognized.
Thank you. Not just, so it is for cash flow, but it's not just for bills to be paid. I want to comment that it is for the financial services to address the internal audit as well as the external investigation. But also, so even though this is how much is paid and this much goes, there's also receipts or bills that need to be paid and receipts that are not yet in. And so to be able to continue to pay the bills and operate in a manner that is consistent with the operations of General Hospital, that cash will be needed. So paying your employees and so forth, payroll, all those kind of things because of the timeline and the timing in and out. So you have it just right, the cash flow.
Okay. Does that include bringing Meharry current from what they're owed, or no, is that a totally different?
I think that's an ongoing discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot tonight. Is it possible, sort of piggybacking, I thought about it when Councilmember Evans was talking, piggybacking on what she was saying, is it possible so that we learn from our mistake, or just learn in general, to have some parameters or some guardrails around what these boards and commissions can offer? So like, for example, if I'm in the 2020 meeting, I feel like my responsibility, if I'm on that authority, is to contact Metro Finance and say, you know, this is something that we're looking at committing the taxpayers to pay this. Is this feasible? Because there's a difference between Metro General and Vanderbilt, for example, who has a whole different set of revenue. And I mean, it's just a completely different operation. And so I just don't want to get in this situation again where we go like, oh yeah, that sounds good. And we're going to compare to all these people. But if you don't have the money to do it, you don't have the money to do it. And so it was an irresponsible commitment to make. I just don't know what types of guardrails we have or parameters that are given to these boards and commissions that are obligating taxpayer dollars.
Finance or legal?
That's a tough question. So off the top of my head, I would say that for better or worse, Metro has decided to conduct a lot of its business through boards and commissions. They have independent boards. They have quite a bit of authority. And in the case of the hospital authority, they have historically exerted their independence to the full measure is given. And so whether or not a board should have the authority to authorize a contract of any type where it lacks the financial capacity to pay it, I think that could be a question for the mayor's office in terms of policy and potential board reforms. I think it could be an opportunity for this body if it's so decided. It's very difficult. If you have a board exerting its independence, as that board was doing in 2020, and it did historically over decades. It's very difficult, for instance, for the Metro attorney to stand up and say, you can't pass that, you don't have enough money, because that's not a legal issue. So it's a very difficult situation, but to the extent there is a conversation going forward about guardrails, lessons to be learned from this example, I will be very happy to participate in those conversations.
Councilmember Johnston.
I would too. I think it's something that we need to look at because we do have Metro Legal representation in these boards and commissions, and they do stop us. And it's like, nope, you can't do that. And so I think if we're talking about obligating dollars, that we should maybe have someone from finance to say, oh, we don't, you know, I just think that's, I mean, this is a serious problem. And it's not about losing their autonomy necessarily, but they're not autonomous when it's not their money. So I would love to have this conversation and see what can be done to protect the taxpayers moving forward.
Thank you so very much. Councilmember Evans Siegel, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess this is the second time this year we've dealt with money going through a board or commission and sitting here trying to kind of figure out next steps. I'm sure this isn't the first time for colleagues who've been on council before where you have sat here and had to kind of deal with this coming from a board or commission. And I guess while we're here, I think you mentioned the hospital authorities, one of the more independent authorities. I know one of the questions we get a lot, right, knowing the importance of the safety net hospital, the status of the current lease, would any renewed lease or change in facilities have to come through this council, or is that something the authority can do on its own?
Councilmember Evans Siegel, I'm going to allow the question, but if we could get back to the piece of legislation that is before us. Director Dietz, you're recognized.
There's a brief answer to that question. Any amendment to that lease has to come through this council. Any new lease of a new facility has to come through this council.
Thank you, Director Dietz. And seeing no one else, I will very quickly opine on the legislation as well. Councilmember Toombs said a lot of the things that I wanted to lift up, but just for council members who may not know some of the history of Metro General Hospital, in November 2017, the administration at that time made an announcement that we as a city were going to end inpatient care, and that caused a lot of instability within the hospital and within the community. Panic surged through many people in the community. Metro General Hospital lost staff, they lost qualified doctors because people were not sure if that hospital was going to be able to keep their doors open. And one thing, whether however you feel about Dr. Webb brought stability to the hospital. Dr. Webb was able to make sure that those doors stay open. This is a retirement. This is not a bonus. So this is not saying he did well. This is not saying that he did poorly. This is his retirement, the same way that anyone else works and get a retirement unless you're a council member. Everyone else with a job gets a retirement. So we're not talking about any type of bonus. There's been lots of conversation about Metro General losing money. I just wanted to lift up and remind people that we do give a subsidy to Metro General Hospital, but they're also providing services in the amount of $60 million of uncompensated care per year for our constituents, for our residents, because it's in our charter that we're going to provide this indigent care for people who cannot afford it. So yes, it is an investment that we are making as a city, but it is an investment that is well worth it for individuals who cannot afford their health care. Metro General has received numerous awards under this leadership of Dr. Webb, including in different programs, as Councilmember Toombs mentioned, the food pantry. They're providing 725,000 meals per year. They have been able to get a grade A in the Leapfrog, the 2024 hospital safety grade, and they were ranked #1 in Tennessee for health equity and inclusion by the Lawn Hospital Institute. So I just want to remind us that, again, we're not talking about a bonus. We could talk about a bonus, but we're not talking about a bonus. We're talking about a retirement that needs to be paid out so that we can make sure that we are reducing the liability for our city. So I'm going to vote in support of this, and I ask that my colleagues do the same. Seeing no one else in the queue to speak, I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Was that an abstention or a no vote, Councilmember Johnston? An abstention. Okay, thank you. We have motion carries 8 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstention. The next item that is on the agenda is agenda item number 10. RS 2025-1115, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle the claims of Jennifer Parker against the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County in the amount of $175,000, with the said amount to be paid out of the Judgment and Losses Fund, sponsor Porterfield. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? I see Councilmember Allen first, and then Councilmember Cortez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was a more troubling case than what we usually get. It's not a fender bender or rear ending or something like that. I just was, if someone could speak to whether this is even still being investigated or if we just dropped it or why we settled on this one.
Thank you. Legal, you're recognized.
Okay, I feel like that was about 3 questions in one, so I want to make sure that I address everything that you're asking, so we can take those hopefully one by one.
And do you mind introducing yourself?
Yes,
Thank you.
Allison Bussell on behalf of the Department of Law. I am over the litigation division, but I did actually work this case with John Whitaker, who is another lawyer on my team. It's not clear to me, Councilmember Allen, if you're asking if the underlying incident, the sort of criminal matter, is being investigated, or is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay. The answer is no. So this was a malicious prosecution lawsuit, and a malicious prosecution lawsuit cannot even be brought until the underlying charges have actually been resolved in favor of the plaintiff who is now bringing a civil lawsuit. So the civil lawsuit was filed after the criminal prosecution was halted. Now, to be clear, the criminal prosecution was halted after the assistant district attorney who was on the case changed hands. Like the criminal case changed hands, and the second criminal lawyer that the second DA that had the case ultimately just decided not to move forward and prosecute. I would say, like many cases that we handle in the Department of Law, this was not a slam dunk for either side. It was more of a situation where there could potentially be a large judgment, would be a possibility. If Ms. Parker was successful, she probably would have been awarded a substantial amount of money because she spent, significant time in prison or in jail. But ultimately, we concluded that there was enough risk on both sides of the equation that it made sense to mediate. And so we took it to a mediation. We had an all-day mediation with an outstanding mediator and ultimately reached, it was a long mediation, but we ultimately reached this amount, believing it to be in the best interest of Metro, just to, again, just eliminate the possibility of a significantly larger judgment that would, of course, also have attorney's fees tacked on top of it, because it is a civil rights lawsuit. In all of our civil rights lawsuits, you are stuck with attorney's fees as well if the plaintiff is successful.
Thank you. Councilmember Allen, anything else? Nope. Okay, Councilmember Cortez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. My initial question was answered. Thank you. But a follow-up question. The grand jury returned an indictment. Did the DA say what, did the new DA, when they took over the case, say why they decided to just drop the charges? Was there any cause given for that?
No, the criminal files do not reflect why that DA felt, differently than the first DA that handled the suit. No, we don't know. I can say, like many cases, there was no, smoking gun, so to speak. That's kind of a bad pun in the circumstance. But like many criminal cases, they probably also felt like it could go either way. And ultimately, the second DA did not tell us exactly why he elected not to move forward. But I do believe that it had something to do with what he perceived to be the strength of the criminal case.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you so very much. Is there any additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The next item is agenda item number 12, RS 2025-1117, a resolution to approve a memorandum of understanding or MOU entered into by and between the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, or ATF, and the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acted by and through the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department to develop and implement crime gun intelligence-driven strategy between the agencies to reduce and combat gun-related violence in the Nashville metropolitan area. Sponsors Porterville, Evans, and Allen. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Cortez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. A piece of the legislation says ATF may separately reimburse overtime subject to availability of funds, but this MOU does not require such funding. Do we know what would determine ATF reimbursing us for that overtime?
While I don't know, there's someone walking to the back who does. If you could introduce yourself, you're recognized.
Good afternoon, Chris Gilder, Metro Nashville Police Department. I think the funding is contingent upon, obviously, the budget, so the federal budget. So I think that usually comes in a separate agreement. This is just establishing the arrangement that puts officers on the task force and establishes that, sets a body-worn camera policy, allows us to use our body cams and that sort of thing. And then any funding, overtime funding, comes through a separate agreement. That's, I think, all that is getting in.
And you're confident that that second agreement would come, that would come through?
Well, there have been historically over the years. In fact, we utilize one for crime guns right now. There's one that's ongoing. It has been the last several years. Even if there weren't funding, there is benefit to the police department joining the task force. Again, it helps us with being able to, our folks are federally credentialed. They're able to access records that help prosecute arms trafficking that they otherwise wouldn't have access to if they weren't working that closely with the ATF. We utilize the NIBIN system, and it just helps with prosecutions on serious gun offenders. So there's a benefit even aside from the monetary funding piece.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so very much. Are there any additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries, 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The next item is agenda item number 13, or it's 2025-1118, a resolution accepting the terms of a cooperative purchase and master agreement for the public safety unmanned vehicle systems and associated services for the Department of Metropolitan Police, sponsors Porterfield and Evans. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilmember Cortez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested, what is the CBRNE robot?
Chief Gilder, Deputy Chief Gilder, you're recognized.
Thank you. So CBRN stands for Chemical, Biological, Radiological, Nuclear, and Explosives, and it's basically a robot that they send anytime we get a suspicious item call or a possible bomb. This is a robot that they can send downfield by itself to do scans and assess the level of danger, whether or not it's some inert device, something totally harmless, or is in fact an explosive device that needs to be disposed of.
Could you say that name 3 times fast?
No.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Cortez. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries, 9 in favor, 0 against, and 0 not voting. The next item that is not on the consent agenda is agenda item number 18. That is RS 2025-1123, a resolution approving a preliminary and engineering agreement between CSX Transportation Incorporated, a Virginia corporation with its principal place of business in Jacksonville, Florida, and the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to facilitate bridge replacement over CSXT rail at West Due West Avenue. Sponsors Benedict, Porterfield, Gamble, and Parker. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. I see Councilmember Benedict rising. You are recognized.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me, even though I'm not on your committee. I'd like someone on the body to, on the committee to please move for a 1-meeting deferral. This has to go to the Planning Commission.
I heard a motion and a second for a 1-meeting deferral. Is there any discussion on the deferral? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries, 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting for a 1-meeting deferral. The next item is agenda item 19, RS 2025-1125, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle the property damage claim of McDonald's Corporation against the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County in the amount of $28,290.57, with that said amount to be paid out of the self-insured liability fund. Sponsor Porterfield. Can I get a motion? It has been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Councilmember, we'll do Cortez first and then Allen this time.
Thank you, Chair. I was really frustrated reading this. Is there anyone from the department who can speak to what kind of truck this was? And is there any policy around what kind of duties outside of their job they can be doing with these trucks?
Yes, if you could please recognize yourself. Please share your name, Mr. Honeysucker. Thank you. Introduce yourself is the word I was looking for.
I'm John Honeysucker, Assistant Director of Governmental and External Affairs at this time. At that time, that was under my jurisdiction as the interim person in charge of waste services. This was a rear loader. This made absolutely, a front loader, which made absolutely no sense for him to drive that size type of vehicle under a canopy at McDonald's. So at that particular time, make no excuses. There was no reason for him to be doing that. So with that, in regards to that, we were in the middle of transitioning the departments. It was a transitional time at that time for us to move the waste on its own department from the water department, which is still on the MOU. So at that time, the superintendent should have documented and did some disciplinary action, but he turned around. The superintendent resigned from the department. So it was kind of a little void there from disciplining the particular employee, but it was expressed to him to take some classes to help identify these particular areas. And with Ms. Thurman in place right now, she's implementing a different type of safety protocol to make sure that this does not happen again.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Honeysucker. Councilmember Cortez, you're recognized.
So will we have policy in place to state that they can, like specifically for things like this and for the use of these trucks? That's being drafted now, you're saying?
Yes, sir. There's things that are being put in place right now, safety mechanisms put in place right now. Also, they have recently, and Sharon can correct me, they have a new tracking program that they've placed on the trucks to help identify things where if they're out of their assigned zones in different areas, they'll be able to identify that, and that'll be also a coaching mechanism for them to be recognized.
Thank you. Could you send that to the council whenever it's completed?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. You're recognized.
Those were all my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
Thank you. So I know that we are hopefully going to be implementing some training for our drivers. I know we're going to have a couple of other lawsuits coming up. I'm pretty sure we've totaled one of our pup trucks recently, which is not great. You mentioned tracking. What's the name of that software that's being implemented now?
I'm going to let Sharon Smith speak on that.
Thank you.
One.
Yes, that software is called Zonar. It's a combination of a pre- and post-trip check that's required by the Department of Transportation, but it also helps keep track of where the vehicle is.
Didn't we just install what's called Verizon Connect in the last year that does exactly the same thing?
Well, actually, this is a little different than Verizon Connect. It has a system of, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but spots around the truck. The driver has a puck, a device in his hand that he or she has to go around the truck, and it tracks to make sure they're actually spending enough time at each location to ensure that they have done a thorough pre- or post-trip.
Thank you so very much. And Councilmember Johnston, if you don't mind, on the legislation.
I know, sorry, but okay, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. We are down to our last 3 items, friends. Agenda item number 21, RS 2025-1127, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle a claim of David Hill against the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County in the amount of $100,000, of which $47,786 will be paid from the Judgment and Losses Fund, and $52,214 will be paid from the Department of Water and Sewerage Services, sponsored Porterfield. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Quinn Evans-Siegel, followed by Councilmember Allen. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I was just hoping to get an explanation of the breakdown between the Judgment and Losses Fund and the Department of Water and Sewerage Services.
Absolutely. To get clarity on your question, is the question why there is a breakdown, or how the breakdown was, how it was broken down?
Both.
Both. Okay, thank you. And would water or legal like to take that, or administration, or, Jesus, Gandhi, anybody? Okay. Mr. Honeysucker, you're recognized.
All right. Well, Councilor, the breakdown for this particular settlement was the $47,786 was paid. That was for his compensation, and the other $52,214 was for the judgment itself. And I know did you have a part 2 to that?
Councilmember Evans-Siegel. Legal, you're recognized.
Sure, Laura Fox from Metro Legal. It's not actually a judgment, but it is the part that's not salary. And so traditionally in these employment cases, back pay and salary, those kinds of things the department pays. And then anything that we feel like we're paying extra to settle the case comes from judgments and losses. So that's how we typically make a distinction. But there's no judgment in this case. It hasn't gone to trial or anything like that.
Councilmember Evans-Siegel.
Gosh, that opens up a lot of questions, but none are on this judgment, so I will save them.
Thank you. An email will be
Perhaps we can talk
appreciated.
later.
There we go. All right. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized. Thank you, Councilmember Evans-Siegel. You're recognized, Councilmember Allen.
When we speak with the HR department, we always hear about good processes that are in place to ensure that people can talk about issues that they're uncomfortable with without fear of retaliation. And the fact that we settled makes me wonder if there was retaliation, and if so, are we fixing that? Because that, I mean, that should be something that employees should never have to be afraid of. So can we get some clarity on that, please?
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Mr. Honeysucker, you're recognized.
Yes, ma'am. I do want for the record to know that it says under here for Metro Water, it was under the umbrella. This was a waste services related situation, and it was, of course, under the water umbrella at that time. There are processes and procedures for the staff to be able to address any concerns that they have. Again, when we were initially garnered with taking over this task with this, there were challenges that had pre-existed that we had inherited. And we were trying to work through this process that had typically been going on for whatever it may have been, had been quite a few years prior. And we've taken on that task of trying to make the adjustments, but it was really kind of hard to clean up everything within a 36-month period of time. But there are processes and procedures that we are working to make sure, and along with the new director, she has implemented quite a few new protocols in place to help identify anything like this and to make sure that employees are able to express any concerns that they may have to get a fair and equitable chance.
Thank you so very much.
And then my follow-up would be, so if it's an issue of transition from a previous department, which I guess would have been Public Works, do we need to get a statement from Public Works that that culture no longer exists there either? Maybe.
That's a great question.
Do we have someone that can speak to that? I guess Public Works is under what, NDOT now? So
Yes.
That's what would have been left, yeah.
yeah, so is there anyone from NDOT that could speak to?
And no one is here from NDOT at this time.
Okay.
They don't have any reason to thought.
But we can get some, we can definitely follow up with the council later.
Thank you. That would be helpful. I appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries, 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The next item is RS 2025-1129, a resolution requesting Mayor Freddie O'Connell to compel the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department and purchasing agent to compel the procurement of license plate readers for use by the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department. Sponsors Hancock and Webb. This legislation, the sponsor spoke in Transportation and Infrastructure today and said that it is her intent to withdraw this legislation. That committee did go ahead and make a motion for an indefinite deferral, and that motion prevailed. So would anyone on our committee like to make a motion? Councilmember Toombs.
Move for indefinite deferral.
There was a motion for there was a motion for an indefinite deferral. Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the indefinite deferral say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries, 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. And the last and final item on our agenda is bill on second reading. That is BL 2025-770, an ordinance amending Chapter 2.40 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws relative to the Department of Law. Sponsors Porterfield and Toombs. Can I get a motion? It has been moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Johnston, would you like to be recognized?
Yes, thank you. I was going to move the amendment.
Okay, is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Johnson, you're recognized.
I'm going to defer to Councilmember Benedict, please.
Councilmember Benedict, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilmember Johnston, for moving the amendment. So in summary, colleagues, this is a transparency amendment for the use of public funds when the Department of Law settles claims. It's crucial that we provide total transparency with the public, and this amendment helps with that. So this amendment changes a few things. It requires the law department to work more closely with department heads. It changes the amounts that legal is requesting in the bill from $35,000 down to $25,000. I'm not sure how that number was chosen, but 25 seems like a nice round number rather than 35. Again, I don't know why 35 was chosen. It requires written communication to any department head when their departmental funds are used in a settlement. And so when today there's no rule that provides this transparency to department heads, it requires a report to council on all outside legal costs when we have outsourced our legal work. When we have to hire outside counsel, we need transparency to those costs for our constituents. And the last change is to add reporting of the cases when they are entered, not only when they are finalized. Again, this will give us transparency into the legal work of the Department of Law that they're doing on behalf of taxpayer money. So as you can see, the goal here is more transparency And the amendment to the bill still increases the ceiling for those settlements. But along with that trust, we deserve clear information from the department we are trying to give this authority to.
Thank you so very much, Councilmember Benedict. Councilmember, I'm going to go to Vice Chair Toombs first, and then we'll go to Councilmember Cortez. Vice Chair Toombs, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to get some feedback from Metro Legal on this amendment.
Legal, you're recognized.
Hi, Allison Bussell on behalf of the Department of Law. Do you want me only to speak to the amendment or to the bill itself?
Could you speak to both, please?
Sure. So our goal in bringing this bill to the council for consideration was really just to modernize the code as it applies to the Department of Law. A lot of these provisions were extraordinarily outdated, have not kept up with inflation. Our desire in increasing the thresholds was, again, just to modernize. They've not been updated in decades, if they've ever been updated. And so it will allow the Department of Law and quite frankly, the claims division, I think even more frequently to resolve claims more efficiently and effectively, because every time you have a clear liability car accident that results in a $7,000 loss, that has to come to the council for approval, and there are a lot of those. The overwhelming majority of claims in that dollar range that we were proposing are approved on consent. And so the idea is just to keep things flowing. You all know there are a lot of claims and lawsuits in the pipeline. And so it will allow us to resolve things that really do need to be quickly resolved, more quickly, to be able to focus more attention on the things that will take more time and attention. I will speak to the thresholds themselves. Our goal there, I would say the way the code was originally written, and this is just the folks who originally wrote it wanted it to be that way. I don't know those people, so I can't speak to their intentions, but they did distinguish between property damage claims and all other types of claims, and they made the threshold for property damage claims higher than the threshold for other claims. So currently, the code provides the legal department the ability to settle a non-property damage claim at a threshold of $5,000 without council approval. The threshold for a property damage claim, however, under the code as it's currently written, is $15,000. I don't know why that's the way it is, but that's the way it is. So what we had proposed was raising the all claims category to $25,000. And that was not a number out of thin air. That is the threshold for General Sessions Court. So the idea kind of being, if you can bring this in small claims court, then we can let the Department of Law, in its discretion, resolve that without having to bring it to the council. And the only reason we proposed 35 for the property damage is because it's higher than 25, and the original code writers believed the property damage amount should be higher. There's certainly no issue with making that 25 as well, but that was the rationale behind those thresholds. I would say the only concern that we would have with the amendment is that we would, and these are kind of more practical concerns. First of all, the legal department, I've been around the city of Nashville legal department since 2005, and I can say we never settle cases without consultation with department heads and departments. Chris Gilder talks to me way more than he wants to, probably. We care very deeply about our departmental clients, and we never want to bring something to the council that we haven't spent significant time explaining and coming to an agreement on. And I can't think of a time when we haven't been able to come to the table and come to the council with a proposal that we are all okay with. That said, I do think it's important for there to be someone that is an ultimate decision maker in the event there is an irreconcilable difference between what the department head might want and what the legal department believes the council should do, or that it should propose to the council. And so what we would suggest is in the amendment, instead of it saying, after consultation and guidance of the applicable department head, we would prefer that it just say in consultation with the department head, because the word guidance, I think in our view, it might create some ambiguity as to who is the ultimate decision maker on that. And we would, of course, consult with the department. And I think, again, in most instances, reach the same agreement. But we do think it's important that the Department of Law be able to make the ultimate decision about what to bring to the council for approval. And then we would also, just because of the practical realities of governance, we are oftentimes talking with an assistant chief or an assistant director of a department in lieu of the actual department head, who is then communicating with the department head. And so adding or delegating, I think, would be helpful just from a practical perspective to give us the ability to continue having that consultation through folks, obviously at high levels of government, but may not necessarily be the chief of police or the director of water services.
Thank you so very much. Vice Chair Toombs, you're recognized.
And Chair, another part of the amendment, and maybe Metro Legal understood it, is the sponsor asking for a report of every single case that's in Metro Legal? The sponsor of the amendment, and if that's true, then what's the response?
So let's direct it to the sponsor of the legislation. Are you requesting a report of every piece of legislation?
I'm going to direct that, excuse me, to Ms. Zeitlin, please.
Every case, my apologies. Okay, so now we're going to ping pong over to Ms. Zeitlin, if you can introduce yourself.
Hannah Zeitlin, Metro Council Office. And I will try to answer, but I'm going to look to Councilmember Benedict for confirmation. I believe the intent was to any judgment amount, if there is a judgment amount, that would come to the council just across the board. So anything that is entered against the metropolitan government would come in a report to the council. Is that correct?
That's right. Thank you, Ms. Zeitlin. And in the report, so we received
Judgments
this.
against the metropolitan government, sorry.
That's right. So thank you for that clarification. So in the report that we get currently, the goal here would be potentially an asterisk that says, you know, here's the ones that are entered but not yet finalized, so that we can see what's happening there, so we can understand, is there a $100,000 case out there? Is there $1 million case out there? Is there a 10,000 case out there, right? So that we can see what that looks like is the goal.
Thank you. And then the second part of that question was directed to legal. Would you repeat the second part of the question?
Hold on. So are you looking for like a court has adjudicated, there's a judgment, when that judgment is entered, or are you asking about when a case is filed against the city?
When the judgment is entered.
Okay, okay. And that's, don't we already get that?
Director Darby, you're recognized.
Currently, the statute calls for a report when the judgment is final. And I would be more than happy to let Allison explain, Ms. Bussell explain the difference between a judgment being entered and a judgment being final, because those are two different things.
Ms. Bussell, you're recognized.
Sure. So a judgment being entered happens right after a trial. So I'll just use Tracy Turner's as an example. The judgment was entered after the trial based on the jury's verdict. We have asked the court to reduce the amount of the compensatory damages portion of that award, and that motion is pending. The court will eventually rule. At some point, someone may appeal. Until all of those things happen, that judgment is not final. So this change would require me to report to the council. It requires the Department of Law. I just happen to be the one to do it. Would require us to pull that data immediately after the trial, well, within 60 days of the judgment being entered. So that would mean you would get that Tracy Turner judgment now, as opposed to after that motion and any appeal from that motion had been resolved. So I think it could increase the amount of information coming to you, because we sometimes get judgments set aside, but it would certainly get those to you sooner. And then I guess technically, if anything different happens to that judgment as a result of those, well, let me say this differently. I think it actually, in most instances, will probably double the amount of information that we are putting out, because it would require a report right after the trial, because that's when the judgment is coming down. Then you'll get an attorney's fees motion. So that's potentially going to be increasing the amount of the judgment. And then if it goes up on appeal and anything in the appeal alters the amount of that judgment, that would also have to be reported.
Thank you so very much. Councilmember Toombs, did you have, you're on.
I think at this point, just a comment, I don't feel like that information is necessary for us to get information when the judgment is entered. I agree with Ms. Bustle that that's going to significantly increase the amount of information that we receive as a council and may actually be confusing. We have a judgments and losses budget, so it's not like we're approving things, well, in most cases, approving things that are outside of that judgment and losses budget, and we need to trust our legal counsel to do their jobs. So I'm not seeing how that information is helpful. I think it would be even more confusing.
Thank you, Councilmember Vice Chair Toombs. We have Councilmember Cortez, then Councilmember Johnston, and then Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my questions were answered, but I did have a follow-up. It's more of a comment, and this is not any implication on my trust for the Department of Law. I do have immense trust in the work that you all do. Something just feels a little weird about this with transparency and like the McDonald's case we just discussed, that's just barely above this threshold. So when these come before us, it does give us an opportunity to look at policy and look at other needs within the county. I feel that threshold is a little high, at least that's my gut feeling right now. Do you see any other benefit to this? Have you seen with any other cities that have implemented this, have they seen a cost savings with settlements where people are willing to settle at a lower amount if it's a quicker settlement?
Ms. Bustle, you recognize.
I would say the council threshold amount is definitely an impediment to settlement. That is for sure. The fact that settlements have to be brought and publicly, discussed, if we have the ability to do that at 8,000 instead of 5,000, that can certainly impact our ability to settle cases. I haven't done a survey of other cities to know what other cities are doing. I do know enough to know that cities do have a relatively, they certainly have a threshold. I don't think $25,000 is exorbitant by any stretch. I would also just keep in mind that any claims, anything that is coming out of our office, unless it's privileged, is information that you can have. So, there is no, I hope that this is not viewed as an impediment to transparency from the legal department. I get questions, Director Dietz, Laura, we all get questions from time to time about lots of things, and we are happy to provide any kind of reports that any of you want on anything that's happening. It's really more just that it can create an efficiency impediment because, this is not it's not a hard process, but it does create additional time. And so certainly for those, again, things that are coming through the claims division, sometimes it's just property damage even, medical bills have gone up. Mechanics bills have gone up. All of these expenses have gone up, certainly since 2005 when I first showed up on the scene, and yet our threshold amounts haven't changed. And so it's really just, it's really just increasing the amount in terms of percentage of the claims that we're having to bring before the council because it is harder to resolve things. $5,000 goes like that when you're talking about a car. Car accidents don't happen without causing $5,000 worth of damage. So that's the idea behind it. We are certainly happy to provide the council with any information you want about anything that's coming out of our office.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have, I know the intention behind the amendment, and it sounds like we're way far off, and I don't think that we are. I just think that we have maybe some unintended consequences. And so I'm going to move a one meeting deferral so that we can discuss and refine so that we're all on the same page.
Before you do that, Councilmember Johnston, because I was actually going to recommend a deferral to talk through these, could we, let's recognize the other two individuals just in case they have something that needs to, in the event that y'all have something that needs to be considered for the for the deferral, like something else that they need to work on. So with that understanding, I'm gonna come back to you, Councilmember, to make that motion. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just speak in support of the deferral. I think incorporating Ms. Bussel's comments into the amendment can make it a better amendment, so I support that.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans Siegel.
Yeah, I was going to get to a deferral after asking two questions. So I guess first question is a little bit of a statement, but there's a question at the end. I think I could see why a property claim is different from other claims because it can be determined with a lot more specificity and proof. And so you can say, oh, well, we'll have a higher threshold for property because we're coming with receipts, right? Property claims have receipts. Other claims don't, so there's a little bit more judgment there. So maybe that is a reason to have different thresholds. If we're going to keep different thresholds, I'm not sure that's a good enough reason, but I think that's right. And so I guess my question is that right?
Ms. Bussell, you recognize.
I think the practical reality is for all the claims that are falling into this dollar amount, these probably all have receipts, so to speak, because even your personal injury claims are typically tied to medical bills. And so I think for most of these, there is some numerical assessment that is being done. For a $24,000 claim that the council is approving, there's not the, when we come and say, we have no idea what juries are going to do. For a $24,000 claim, there is a more precise prediction that is going into that figure. So I think for car accidents, you usually have medical bills and you usually have property damage receipts, and that is going into that calculation most every time.
Thank you, Ms. Bussell. Just for the clarity of the sponsors who will be working on this legislation, is it your recommendation that property damage stays at a higher amount than non-property damage?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Quinn Evans Siegel, your second question.
Thank you, Chair. My second question is, we get a report of significant litigation and judgments entered now. I don't really want a report of anything we settle, honestly, for less than $5,000 because that's just so small. But a lot of the judgments that we deal with as a body are less than $35,000 or $25,000. And I think from a transparency standpoint, is there anything that would prevent us from having, and I hate to ask for more reports, but I'm going to say, is there anything like confidentiality in a settlement that would prevent us from having that report, say if we want to know if somebody's driving into a drive-through lane?
All right, Ms. Bussell, you're recognized.
No, I mean, barring something like a minor is involved or something that would be subject to a protective order, our settlement agreements are not protected. They are not confidential in the way that a normal settlement agreement would. So no, our settlements are not confidential like in, the normal private litigation world.
Councilmember Evans Siegel.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I'd throw out to folks working on the amendment that it would be great if we could include some sort of reporting in there that, exempts out things that are subject to protective orders, but still provides transparency for the public.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans Siegel. And if we could, just an idea, maybe one of the sponsors could put this up on Council Connect. And if council members have suggestions of what they would like to see in this amendment, if it could be, further discussed there or lifted up there so that the sponsors will have that information in addition to the conversation today. Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
Renew my motion to defer to one meeting.
1 meeting deferral has been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the deferral? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.